morning, students. Welcome to class. I'm Dr. Sonia Korbans, and today I will be teaching you the topic psychological test, and particularly about the individual and group test and computer assisted test in the subject methodology of educational research. So students, my learning objective of today's class is to tell you about psychological tests as what they are and why they are so important in research process, and what do you mean by individual and group test, what are the main characteristics of test and computer assisted test. So we are going to understand all about it. So let's understand. I really hope you will understand attentively and understand the concepts in a very minute way. So first of all, introduction part of psychological testing or assessment. So what is that? Just try to understand, students, that psychological assessment is a system of test. It's not like that on the spot you are doing something. It is also not like that it can be done by any of the person or whosoever wishes. So psychological assessment is a series of tests conducted by a psychologist. That means a trained person in the psychological testing. And it is done to gather information about how people think, feel, behave, or react to a certain situation. So this is very important for all of us to understand how the psychological assessment is. Because being researcher, it is always in the mind of researcher that way data is to be collected. So the psychological testing actually ample opportunities to understand the feelings, behavior, or reaction of the people. So this is how it is done in a very good way, and if you are well versed with psychological testing, then nobody can challenge your data collection. So it is very important, and as well as it is a process where the findings are used to develop report person's abilities and behavior. So when you are reporting a person's abilities and behavior, that means a lot. It means you have found something related to that person or a group or a society. So known as psychological reporting, which is then used as the basis of make recommendation for the individual's treatment. So this is how student psychological assessment and reports are used in other fields. So if it is like that, you are doing some research and you are also want to get a good data collection. So psychological assessment is must. And reports used in other fields as well, like the case of career planning for young adults, or in the job application, or in the process to determine how well an applicant will fit into the open role. So this is how it is done. Now more about it. So psychological tests are standard measure, and they are devised to assess behavior object and used by psychologists to help people make decisions about their lives and more about themselves. So when we want to understand about our sample, our population, so definitely we have to apply some psychological testing. Tests are of different types, students: intelligence test, aptitude test, vocational test, aptitude test, personality test, among all others tests. So creativity tests. So these are all the testing types which we do according to the psychological norms. Psychological testing is mainly used for psychological diagnosis. What we want to diagnose? We want to diagnose about a certain behavior, certain situation, of a certain feeling. So how the person is reacting or behaving in a certain situation, that is actually known by a psychological test, and it is a wonderful means to collect data. Job candidates, academic placements is also done with the help of psychological test and identify certain behavior, research purposes, etc. So psychological testing is very, very important. The classification of psychological test students can be as per their nature or to be proceed. Or nature by I mean that how it will work. So this, you will all know about how the psychological are done. Now before that, what are the psychological assessment? Just get all about it. So psychological assessment or psychological tests are verbal or written tests for a person's behavior in a particular situation, behavior with peer group, with teachers, with family members, with society. So a person's behavior can be assessed in any of the situation with any of the relatives or any of the person that involves in environment. So many types of psychological tests help people understand various dynamics of the human beings. So it's really a very good way to understand the different dimensions of human beings. You want to understand how much the person is intelligent, where the IQ level stands. You can test the psychologically test. Check the personality. What type of personality is person possessing? Is the person extrovert, introvert, or ambivert? So it is actually helping you to understand that is good at something while the other is good at another. So the comparison is also made very easy and very comfortable for the teacher as well as the students. Because when we are evaluating someone, so it is very necessary for all of us to get an idea about the person. So however, humans are complex beings which can't be defined and classified under certain branches. So the subjective nature of humans and individual differences has quite often raised criticism in psychological testing. Because in some cases, human beings are very complex and scientists cannot actually find those results they assume. So this is how psychological assessment is done on the basis of nature and function. So just understand how the classification of the types of psychological test is done. Number one, it is done as per the nature of psychological test in terms of standardized and non-testing methods. So how the test works? Is it standardized? Is it made by experts, scholars, and it is approved by many of the experts? Is it even a pilot study? Is the result are actually verified? So this is the standardized or non-testing method of testing is included in nature of psychological test. The second type of psychological test is actually divided as per the functions of psychological test. In what field, in what way, in what scenario the test works, such as intelligence test, personality test, test inventories, aptitude test, etc. So these are some tests that are very important for collecting the data from the researcher's point of view. And these type of testing is very helpful in collecting a data as come up to the conclusion on any certain behavior towards a person, towards a thing, or towards a situation. All right, students, I hope you are understanding. Now, students, let's have a look on the characteristics of psychology. So, there are many characteristics which a psychological test must actually accustomed to. must be there. It is a mandatory thing. So I'm going to discuss few key characteristics of the psychological test. And first of all, it is about reliability. Yes, a psychological test must produce the same no matter when it's taken. Reliability is that when you are testing a person at first phase and then second phase. So in both phases or in both types of testing, you are getting the same results. There is no variation in that. So results are same. So it is producing the same result. No, doesn't matter how many times you are taking the test. So it means the test is reliable. It is the purpose of reliability. Then secondly, we talk about validity. Validity is something that what purpose you have made the test. For example, students, you have made a personality test, or it is quite possible that you have made and you are using an adjustment test. But your adjustment test is not assessing the proper adjustment of the person to whom you are testing. So in that case, the psychological test would not be valid. So the psychological test must measure what it is being created to assess. For what purpose it made? What were its objectives at the initial level? So this is how it is very important. Key characteristics of any psychological test, ability and validity must be checked properly. Then next thing we are going to understand, that is objectivity. The assessment or the testing must be free from any personal biasness. When we are scoring or testing of scoring of administration, so the assessment must be free from any kind of personal emotions or scoring. When we actually want to do something, when we are testing something, so testing is very important. So objectivity actually leads us to the correct results. It will not misguide, because you have asked question in certain way which is actually giving you the. But if the psychologist is somehow subjective in testing, psychology is like that the person is feeling biased about particular person, so the results may vary. So when you score the test or you just do the information of scoring or administration, your test must be containing the objective. The next point we're going to understand, that is about standardization. So standardization is standardized in terms of its place, material and time for the assessment, as well as its environment. All these things are very much important and must be standardized by the experts by taking the pilot study also. Now students, let's understand about of psychological tests that we are going to understand today. So classification of psychological test is based on construction, how it is made and how it is administered on the sample. That really matters a lot. So first of all, there is individual and group test. Then secondly, computer assisted test. And thirdly, power test. And fourthly, paper pencil and performance test. And in today's lecture, students are covering first two important psychological tests, that are individual and group test, as well as computer assisted test. So let's understand this in detail. First of all, individual test. As its name suggests, that individual test. So it means it must be administered on a particular person. Administrated academic aptitude tests are divided into two major individual intelligence tests. like Stanford Binet Intelligence Scale 4th edition, Wechsler Intelligence Scale, then WISC 3rd. This is also included in now we are going to talk about Stanford Binet test, intelligence test. So first of all, published by Houghton Mifflin. This is very important information. You must remember the Stanford Binet intelligence test, intelligence individual test. It was firstly published by Houghton Mifflin. Then the 4th edition appeared in 1985. This test has 15 subsets divided into 4 areas. First is verbal, second reasoning, qualitative reasoning, abstract or verbal reasoning, and then short-term memory. So this is about Stanford Binet intelligence test. Now, how Stanford Binet IQ test is calculated? That's very important to know. So the Stanford Binet intelligence test used a single number known as the intelligence quotient or IQ to represent an individual score on the test. And this score was calculated by dividing the test taker's mental age or her chronological age. Chronological age is that age which is the biological age the person was born, and what is his age according to the time and days. But the mental is something different. It is actually showing you your capabilities of your mental aptitude as your age is possessing. So now in some candidates the mental age is high according to their chronological age. So this is how for done a child with a mental age of 12 and a chronological age of 10 with IQ of 120. So summarize mental age upon chronological age multiplied by 100. So mental age by chronological age multiplied by 100. You'll be getting IQ from Stanford Binet test. Now, Wechsler's intelligence scale for 3rd. So this test is published by Psychological Corporation, very important agency to psychological testing. It is appropriate for students between 6 and 16 years of age. And Wechsler's include verbal IQ scores, performance non-verbal IQ scores, IQ scores. Verbal IQ scores, performance non-verbal IQ scores, full scale IQ scores. Now, verbal and performance, what is the difference? Let's understand. So, information, similarities, vocabulary, comprehension or digital span, they are all included in verbal type of test. But when you are showing picture completion, coding picture or arrangement, block design, objective assembly, symbol research, so these are related to performance research. This verbal score is the average of the first five. The performance IQ is the average of the first 6 performance subsets. The full IQ score results from all 11 subset scores. So this is about Wechsler's test. Now see how the group tests are done. What about group test? There are 3 different types of group tests I'm going to tell you about, and group test is done on groups. So group administered academic aptitude tests are divided into 3 types. And first one is cognitive ability test. It means that you are checking the ability or aptitude in a group. Then secondly, Otis Lennon School ability test, test of cognitive skills. So first we are going to understand about cognitive abilities test. This test includes students' non-reading test, level testing that provides verbal, quantitative, and non-verbal score. And this test normed with test of basic test skill and test of achievement proficiency. Non-reading tests have four subsets like that is oral vocabulary, relational concept, quantitative, multimetric. Tests include vocabulary, sentence completion, verbal classification, and verbal analogies. The main thing to understand, students, that anything you can do is checked from a cognitive point of view. If it is told to the subject that to complete a sentence, that means cognitive ability is checked. Quantitative test measure quantitative comparisons, number series, and equation building. The non-verbal include figure analogies, figure classification, and figure synthesis. So this is how cognitive ability is. Next is Otis Lennon School Ability Test. So School Ability Test, and understand it. This test based on levels of material available. And this test is also called Otis Quick Scoring Mental Ability Test or Otis Lennon Mental Ability Test. And this Otis Lennon Mental Ability Test requires 60 to 70 minutes to administer. And this test measures comprehension, verbal reasoning, pictorial reasoning, quantitative reasoning, and score for verbal, non-verbal, and total performance. So this test normed with Metropolitan Achievement Test and Stanford Achievement Test to enhance identification of aptitude achievement. So this is about Otis Lennon School Ability Test. Group test of second edition. This test is appropriate for grades 2 to 12. And 6 level this test covered with grade range. And this test has 4 subsets at each level sequences: analogies, memory, and verbal reasoning. This is how it is done. Now students, let's understand the difference between individual and group test. So there is a comparison in front of you, and I hope everyone is going to understand it very nicely. So first of all, individual test. Individual test can be administered to only one person at a time. One person at a one time. This is how it is called individual test. So the individual test is for one person at a time, but when we talk about group test, test can be administered to a group of persons at a time. So this is how the main differences here lies in the administration of the test. Then secondly, the individual test mainly done to observe characteristics of individual. Personal characteristics are known in individual test. In group test, mainly done to meet practical needs. What are the needs of that particular group? What are the issues that has to be solved? So, in an individual tests are expensive to administer. Group tests are cheaper to administrate. So, these tests involves one-to-one consultation, individual and verbal and non-verbal subsets. But group tests include multiple choice items. And for example, individual test is intelligence test by school psychologists. So this is individual test. But group test, traditional college exams, university exams, they are called group test. I hope all of you have understood very clearly. Now next is what is measured in group and individual test. Very important point for all of you to understand. So, because your ability to influence others, first point. So, this is measured very nicely in group and individual. How much you are different from each other from these type of psychological testing. Then next is your level of involvement in performing a group task. How much you have done in your part when you were doing something in a group. Then third thing very important that we measure your communication style. Are you kind or aggressive? Dominant, controlling, accommodating, listening when interacting with others. So these type of concepts are actually well measured through group and individual testing. The quality of your contribution to the team. How you think about it, how much it is specific to you. So this is how all these things are measured in group and individual testing. How are you measured in group or individual exercises? That's a very important question, and the answer is your individual and other style of interaction. The entire group activity are observed and assessed by the qualified observers and trainers who are typically psychologists or people with special qualification. So this is how you are measured in a group individual exercise. Secondly, the group activity is used as an opportunity to measure your ability to work and interact with others, such as your communication skills, listening skills, influencing skills, social confidence, ability to encourage others, decision-making skills. These skills are very well defined through group and individual exercises. Alright, students, let's move further. Now we are going to see about advantages and disadvantages of individual tests. So first of all, we are going to discuss about advantages. In individual testing, examiner can pay more attention to the examinee. Because individual testing is happening and the examiner is not restricted to any other candidate. So attention level is also very high by that time. This examiner can easily encourage the examinee and observes his behavior, test more closely. Scores on individual tests are not as dependent on reading ability as scores in group test. But there are some disadvantages also, students. So we have to be very particular about disadvantages also. It is very time consuming. Because when you are testing individual one by one and there are many students in a class, then you must be taking a lot of time in testing each individual. So, and moreover, second disadvantage is leading to us that this type of testing requires highly trained examiners. Most probably, the person must be a good psychologist. But this comes into the category of disadvantages also. Then third important thing that we include in as disadvantages, that is it costs more than the group test. Once you are testing an individual and it is consuming a lot of time, so it is costing also. The resources are used more and more. But once you have done a group testing, it is more easy for the researcher to find the conclusions easily in a group. So these are the disadvantages of individual test. Now let's continue. So advantages can be administered to very large numbers simultaneously. Then simplified examiner role. This is about group testing. So large representative exams often use leading to better established norms. But there are some disadvantages also in group testing. So scores on the group test are really dependent on the reading ability. Information obtained by the group test generally less accurate than individual test. Moreover, examiner has less opportunity to obtain cooperation and maintain interest. And examinee's responses are more restricted. Now students, we are going to understand about computer assisted test. After understanding individual and group test, I'm going to explain you about computer assisted test. So first of all, it is very important for you to know about what is CAA, that is computer assisted assessment. And it is a term that covers all forms of assessment, whether summative test that will contribute to formal qualification, formative, that is the test that promote learning but not part of course marking. So delivered with the help of computers also. What is CAA? Computer assisted assessment is a common term for the use of computers in the assessment of student learning. Various other forms exist, such as computer aided assessments, computerized assessment, computer based assessment, that is called CBA in short, and computer based testing. Online computer based assessment have existed nowadays for a long time in the form of multiple choice questions, and which is really very objective, and it's a very good for the assessment of a person's behavior, feeling, emotion in an objective manner. Now, implementation of CAA, that is computer based assessment, is commonly directly made via a computer, whereas computer assisted assessment is used to manage or support the assessment process. So examples are the optical mark reader used to, that is OMR, so read to score the MCQs and all, and programs used to record students' marks. We all know, students, that nowadays competitive exams are also being held through computer assessments. Now, formative versus summative assessment, we are going to understand about it. So computer assisted assessment is typically format, because in that it helps the students to discover whether they have learned what the educator intended and provide timely feedback on how best to reach a subject. Increasingly, it can be summative with limited feedback typically being given at the end of course and serving to grade and categorizing the students' work. It can also be diagnostic by testing for pre-knowledge. So norm reference test versus criteria testing, that is also very important testing. So assessment techniques are usually either norm reference test or criterion reference test. So understand the basic difference in that. Norm reference test assesses an individual's performance in relation to the established by a peer group. But in criterion reference test occurs when a student is assessed on his or her ability to meet a required level of skill or competence. So computer assisted assessment is usually reference test. Remember, students, we were discussing about computer assisted assessment, and that is include criterion reference test. Now, what are the advantages of CAA? Well-written computer assisted testing is more likely to be objective testing. Testing that can be marked objectively and thus offer high reliability. We all know, students, that when we are giving any competitive exam, as it is done nowadays, objective type questions are given. So these objective testing does lose the scope or doesn't harm the opportunities of those students who are doing well in their academics. So there's no chance of cheating also, because whatever the answer is marked, that's for an optimal mark reader will read that only. So the benefit is that the test can be marked quickly and very easily, and the results can also be declared easily, very nicely, and adapted to meet a wide range of learning outcomes also. So it is good for the evaluation purpose, which is done timely, speedily, and in a less time. Now, tests have the following potential to incorporate a wide range of media, to link online assessment to incorporate hints into test questions, to assign other learning activities based on the test results, to make randomized. So this can be made from large question banks. And it is really very important to understand and be measured very easily. So students understand that it is the tests that have high potential to incorporate a wide range of media. A link online assessment to feedback, as I have already told you, then to incorporate into test questions, to assign other learning activities based on the test results. Randomized selection can be made from large question banks to be administered easily, allowing better test management. But CAA is also having its disadvantages to students. So how these advantages are going to harm the assessment process. So let's understand. So it is usually associated with testing knowledge skills rather than conceptual understanding. So basically it is related to skills only, not conceptual understanding. Because of the frequent use of MCQ formatting, which is believed to test a lower level of understanding related to Bloom's taxonomy. So subjective part is on here, and MCQs are considered the lower level, and it is mentioned in Bloom's taxonomy also. But as it suits to maximum examiners and it also suits to need of the present scenario, so MCQs are taken a lot. Then third thing is considered objective test requires skill and practice, and so is initially time consuming. Implementation of CAA system be costly. It is not easy to install all the softwares and computers, many computers in an institution all the time. So hardware and software must be carefully monitored also to avoid failure during examination. So these are the basic disadvantages that we have discussed just now. Security issues can be a lot of problem in web-based CAA. Students require adequate ideas and experience of the assessment type also. Assessors and invigilators need training in assessment, design, IT skills and examination management. And a high level of organization is required of all parties involved in assessment, like academics, support staff, services, administrators. So everyone is involved in one task only. Now let's discuss some developments done in computer assisted assessment, which is really very important to know. So CAA of higher order skills such as application, reasoning is difficult. Research has produced, which is very recently done, an improvement in CAA's ability to test these skills and allow implementation of the tools on the web also. So areas for development include graphical hotspot questions, which involve selecting an area of the screen by moving a maker to the required position. So test assessment is also being developed. Now, next is a number of institutional computer-based assessment development project, many funded by higher education. Initiatives offer free or relatively expensive assessment tools, which do not require the purchase of costly licenses. One example is the Castle Toolkit, one of the book of talent which has been developed so that tutors and course can create online interactive assessment tool quickly and easily without any to HTML, CGI or scripting languages. So Castle Toolkit is also there. It provide a high level authority shell for online interactive tutorials and assessment by developing a comprehensive courseware authoring tool, which will enable tools to produce and maintain online web pages. Has the learning resources available to the student, while requiring a fairly minimal time investment on behalf of the tutor or course developer. Effective question design means that assessment questions test different cognitive processes, comprehension, application, and evaluation, as well as the recall facts. So these are the recent developments in CAA. Dear students, these are the references, studies, and I hope you will really enjoy studying more about psychological testing, especially individual group testing and CAA, that is computer assisted testing. Now it's time for MCQs, quiz time. So let's start that. Psychological tests are with assessment of A, personality only, B, personality only, C, all aspects of psychological functioning, D, sociability. So the answer is all aspects of psychological functioning. So these are the assessment of that. Then secondly, the overall blueprint of the experiment is called treatments, B, experimental design, C, experimental group, D, none of the above. So it is called D, experimental design. Next question, who among the following was man to describe null hypothesis? Raymond Dodge, B, Ronald Fisher, C, Hermann Ebbinghaus, or D, none of the above. Correct answer is Ronald Fisher. The next question, which among the following fields of psychology focuses on the interaction between the physical world and the human behavior? A, educational psychology, B, abnormal psychology, C, environmental psychology, or D, all of the above. So the correct answer is environmental psychology. Students, I hope you have enjoyed this. We have come to the end of the class, and I really hope that you have understood what I have taught you about psychological testing. Psychological testing is very important, and psychological testing is actually required to do a lot of data collection when we want to judge anybody's mood, anybody's behavior, thoughts, feelings, ideas, and the reactions. And with these type of testing, whatever the findings there will be, it develop a report of a person's abilities and behavior, known as a psychologist report. So, which is then used as basis to make recommendations for the individual's treatment also. So, when we are particularly talking about individual testing, so it is done when there is a certain kind of specific problem with an individual. So, psychological assessment reports are used in other fields. I've told you, maybe in choosing your career plans, maybe your job application, a process to determine how well an applicant will fit into an open role. So this is how psychological testing is very important, and I hope you have understood this much. So see you in the next class, students. And stay safe, stay healthy, and keep studying, keep learning. Thank you, students.